Coming up on 21st Century. In Latin America, during the 70s and 80s, hundreds of thousands were tortured, killed, and disappeared. One courageous UN leader spoke out. In Europe, migrants lost in the system, suffering in despair in Italy's detention centers. Welcome to 21st Century. I am Adeshewa Josh. Thanks for joining us. During the 70s and 80s, many Latin American governments waged war on their own people, disappearing, torturing, and killing at will. The United Nations Human Rights Chief during that period stood up to them, and for the first time ever, states were held accountable for their crimes, and they still are.
My name is Theo van Boven. I was the director of the United Nations for Human Rights from 1977 to 1982.
Théo a été le premier haut-commissaire avant la lettre, par son esprit d'indépendance. C'est Théo qui a ouvert la voie.
There was a lot of pressure of all kinds from certain governments, having their Secret Service agents in the corridors looking after what we were doing, following what the NGOs were doing, threatening people, putting pressure on other governments. Latin America had strong dictatorships, and NGOs couldn't mention government names in the Commission for Violations.
It is inexplicable and indefensible for the United Nations not to react urgently to situations of gross violations of human rights.
It was entirely unheard of that a human rights director would take vigorous positions. Everything that a senior UN official did was closely monitored. And so it was his great breakthrough that he decided to act and, in some instances, to speak out publicly against gross violations of human rights.
There is a tendency, at that time at least, that the UN should remain low-key. Some felt that I was too outspoken. Quiet diplomacy is perhaps what they thought, more productive than to speak up. I think this is very questionable, this position.
En su carácter de director, ¿usted hizo algún tipo de gestión?
When, for instance, the coup d'etat occurred in Chile, a special public procedure was created.
The military felt that they had to give the impression right on from the day one that they meant business. Therefore, they bombed the palace of government.
September 11th, that was a dark day and a bit rainy. After that, I would say that the life of a whole generation of Chileans changed.
The military authorities managed to take control of the whole of the country, putting in prison thousands of people. They even put them in the national soccer stadium because there were not enough places in the prisons.
Son impact était très important grâce à Pinochet. Ça peut paraître curieux, mais quand il y a eu le coup d'État, Théo a pris l'initiative, avec quelques autres, de créer une commission d'enquête, et à l'ONU, on appelle ça groupe de travail, pour ne pas inquiéter les États. C'était la première fois à l'ONU qu'une commission d'enquête, qu'on appelait groupe de travail, enquêtait sur des violations de droits de l'homme contre un État.
On the first day of our official visit, we had to pay a sort of courtesy visit to the head of state. That was Pinochet. He was sitting there all by himself in a tower in his office. The desk before him was clean. He accused the UN, the working group, of serving the communist purposes. This we strongly refused. It was argued that his country was known for committing serious violations of human rights, and we wanted to investigate that on the spot. In fact, the general became very angry.
The Chile report may well have been the first UN report that showed how the military dictatorship can destroy the living standards of people. And we could see it when we went there.
The international community knows through the investigations that were carried out by human rights missions from Europe, Theo van Bowen. We never thought that there would be the level of murder or torture or disappearance of exiles. It can happen anywhere.
The next big challenge for us after Chile were the disappearances, in particular in Argentina, but in other countries too.
Yo, Teniente General Jorge Rafael Videla, Comandante General del Ejército Argentino, juro por Dios, nuestro Señor y estos santos evangelios, desempeñar con lealtad y patriotismo el cargo de miembro de la Junta Militar.
One of the first things that Theo did was to open his office and our office to victims and to their representatives. Meeting people who have been tortured is very different than reading reports sent in by non-governmental organizations.
En el caso particular mío, mis tres hijos mayores tenían una militancia opositora a la dictadura. Y bueno, pero la víctima propicia fue Laura, la mayor de mis hijas, que fue secuestrada en noviembre de 1977. Estaba embarazada en el momento del secuestro y junto con su compañero fueron llevados a un centro clandestino de detención.
The mothers, the madres, the abuelas, they were very visible and well known, and as a group of committed women, I think, who were directly involved, that had a great impact on public opinion.
Disappeared children. The government claimed that it was all a part of terrorism and terrorist gangs. And the question was put, are these little children, are they also terrorists?
Theo van Boven nos defendió, nos apoyó, se solidarizó con nosotros, luchó tanto. Era costumbre del matrimonio van Boven recibirnos a nosotras que estuvimos en la casa de ellos.
In the 70s, I was in exile in France after having left my country. I started to work in the struggle for human rights, and I heard about what was taking place here in Geneva, in this very same place, room 17 of the Palais des Nations Unies.